It's been a few days since WGS, while Gothic sleeps the new quest, and we're gonna go and do a new Zammy method using this Scorching Bow. This is one of the 3 Synapse weapons, and it is particularly good at Zammy. I'm gonna go so far as to call this new method the meta going forwards, especially for solo kills. It is just so easy and so simple, but it does come with some requirements of pretty close to max gear, I would say, and I'd recommend doing this on task. It is 4-tick, so you can use the Bofo method if you want to supplement the method, but for the most part this is pretty standard stuff and works really well. So on task with a Slayer Helm, this would be perfect. This is the setup I now use, but I'm also going to talk about the claws, because there doesn't seem to be very much... and there's not many people agreeing on why the claws are good or how we use them and all that stuff. So we'll get into a bit of that as well. Now, this method is only for Zammy, and the reason is because these weapons are good against demons, and because the other God Wars bosses aren't demons, that doesn't really work. So how does this bow actually work? Well, it's boosted damage and accuracy for starters, and it also has a special attack which binds NPCs for a period of time. I think it's something like 5 ticks when it's not a demon, but it goes up to 20 ticks when it is a demon. And Krill being a demon means this is highly effective. Given that a lot of the room's mechanics are about kiting him, this kind of just says, nah, screw that, and you can just stand still, which is very, very broken. Again, this is stronger on task, but the good news is the bow doesn't really care whether or not you hit. And so even if you deal a 0, it's going to bind Zammy. I have Lightbearer on to increase the amount of times I can spec, and typically on task you have to spec 2 to 3 times, but rarely ever 4. Off task, I think you may be speccing up to 4, and so you might see me running around a little bit to make up for some damage and get away from him. But regardless, this is a really, really competitively good method to T-bow and Shadow. It is actually better than a T-bow, so this weapon just is straight up better, nothing more to it. And as far as a Shadow goes, it is slightly worse than a Shadow. But I'll get into some of the nitty-gritty surrounding why it is that you can't, like, bind with the bow and swap into a Shadow, stuff like that. And basically why is this setup the best setup. I'll talk about that a little bit. But firstly, the claws. Oh boy. Before I get into Zammy, what I want to do is read off a little bit of text that Kirby put in a channel, talking about why the claws are good and why the claws are bad, because you may not trust me with calcs, and I sure don't, but I trust Kirby. And the bottom line is, these claws appear to be, the bone claws appear to be better than dragon claws by about 4% in most scenarios. And you might be like, wait a minute, you've been telling us the whole time they're not that good. It's true. The reason is because, practically speaking, they're not that strong. And so to quote Kirby directly, and before I get into the boss room, let me go through this. The new claws, this is completely how Kirby said it, word for word. They feel more like a side grade to Dragon Claws, beating claws by about 4% in most cases, sometimes a bit more, in some cases less. In cases where the main hand weapon, like Scythe, surpasses 14 DPS, this seems to be about where the Dragon Claws become more efficient. Also, about 10 to 16% of DPS comes from the burn, so if the enemy dies early, typically the Dragon Claws win. Special attack usage also determines which one wins on some bosses, with leftover special attack at the end of the fight. Boss cycles also determine who wins, with Dragon Claws winning at bloat, as the extra Bone Claws specs most likely end up being wasted ticks, unless you can get an extra Scythe hit off. Not to mention reduced burn damage when bloat walks. This also makes Burning Claws struggle on opponents that go invulnerable, as a lot of burn is wasted. As I look at it, it does make me wonder if Burning Claws even need a nerf, as they only slightly beat claws in optimal conditions, and lose out from many factors. At the same time, it's hard to call them budget claws with how close they come, so the question is if we're okay with a side grade, or if we want them to feel more strictly like budget claws. And on a more interesting note, if you're interested in this, from Kirby, he says, the worse DPS the main hand weapon has, like Scythe to Blade of Saildor to Tent Whip, the more benefit the player has from lower spec usage of Bone Claws, allowing them to spec more often. So our players on a budget will see more gains from Burning Claws over Dragon Claws than a max gear player. So that's all the technical stuff aside, but it's interesting, right? And basically what he's saying, which is what this is my position. On paper, Bone Claws do beat Dragon Claws seemingly everywhere. And yet, well, okay, maybe not everywhere, but nearly everywhere. And yet, when you take it out of the math and the DPS calcs, and you try and start simming it, or you start looking at practical use cases, Dragon Claws starts winning. which is really interesting, because you wouldn't think it would be that deep. But this is a similar scenario to the likes of, for example, let's say, Shadow at P2 Verzik. It may actually be technically bis and good on paper, but practically you can't fit the switches in. And practically there are problems with moving it, using it properly, and all that. And so, my position on a lot of this stuff is, it's okay to look at the DPS calcs and the theoreticals, but you have to actually try it to know. And so for me, the Bone Claws don't seem to be doing that much. They have a use case at Colosseum for like max gear, and outside of that, they don't seem that good. What I suggest is that they turn it into, and we're going to get started real soon here, but what I suggest is they change it so it's 35% spec. And this would bring it back down, so it's always worse than Dragon Claws and Void Waker, which is closer to the original design idea, which was to create an item better than DDS, but worse than Claws and Void Waker. That seems to make the most sense to me, and because it is so contentious and sometimes good and sometimes bad, it's a bit confusing for people who don't really know how to gear well, and if you're in mid-gear, mid-game, you're never going to know. Like, I basically don't know. No one seems to know. So if the guys at the high end of the game who are like doing DPS calcs don't have a clue, how does anyone else? So I think they should change it to 35%, and that's all I'll say on that. Now, getting into the Zammy method. I've been doing this on stream a bunch. It's super fun. It's super chill. Normally, what we do is we run around and we do like, we move from tile to tile, and we try and kite Zammy. In this case, we load up our spec bar, we eat up, and remember, I'm off task, but it should be fine. And we pray range and rigor for pretty much the entire time. And as we enter... Oh, I need to kill 3 more minions. I'm so good at the game. You go kill 3 more imps. And as we enter, we're going to instantly bind Zammy and then walk away from him a little bit. And the power of this method is going to become very readily apparent. Very, very, very instantly apparent. Now, this method, again, it's better than T-Bow. Completely better than T-Bow. And it's equivalently good as Shadow. It's basically the same thing as Shadow. On task, particularly. Off task, again, it may be a bit funky, but let's get into it. So, spec on. And we don't need stems or sweets or anything either. Range Pray Rigor. I'm in the private instance, it makes life easier. And I just spec Zammy. And I can now do 5 more attacks. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now we're going to spec again. You see he's going to start moving now. There it is. So we can do 5 attacks. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I barely even used 2 specs here. Now what I like to do is come over here and freeze these guys, stand under, Praying Mage, and kill this guy with the bow. And that's the entire method. And so your first reaction to this might be, dude, that's OP. Nerf it right now. But I'm here to say that it doesn't need a nerf. This is very old content, and this bow is very strong for what it does, but it's only really strong in one place, and that's here. And I don't really believe that one place where it's really strong is enough to want to nerf it, just because it's got some really strong convenience creep. Which is kind of what this is. This is convenience creep. It's not really power creep. It's the same power level as T-Bow and Shadow. But this is very clearly convenience creep. I barely have to do anything per kill. Now, if we were back a few years before we had the 5-0 method, and the 4-0 methods for like Bofer and T-Bow, I might have been saying that, hey, actually, this is a bit strong. But for several years now, Zammy hasn't really been that formidable after all. I mean, we don't take damage from the boss these days at God Wars, thanks to all the methods. And really, this is just lowering the APM. I still have to pay attention, and even better than that, this particular set of gear, I do switches, you know, I do 5-way switches, and I deal with the minions, and that's still interesting enough. And there's a bit of timing as well, because this is where I stand in this corner, by the way. Zammy's coming up in a few seconds here. Gonna get ready. So it's 7 shots. You bind with the first, and then bind with the 7th. So that's 1, 2, 3. Notice these guys can't see me. 4, 5, 6, and 7. He starts walking towards me, and he gets a tile away, and I bind him. Now what I like to do is start moving across the room to stack up the melee and the ranger, like this. And I'm going to rebind him a bit early. It doesn't really matter if you rebind him a few ticks early, because the benefit of this bow is that no matter when you bind him, he rebinds. It's fantastic. So I can rebind him again right now. And it stacks. How good is that? It actually stacks. It also does some minor burn damage you can see on the boss. Right, let's freeze these guys, stand under, and go for this guy. And so it's 20 ticks, but you can refresh it whenever you want, and his zeros don't matter. If you roll a 0, it just binds him. Crazy. Very fun though, very fun. Now, again, I'm off task, so on task it's even better. Very, very strong on task. And very consistent as well. Let's refreeze these guys. And I like to stand over here on the corner, so when the melee slides, he slides into me, and it's still next to this guy. And this is a Blood Scepter. You can use whatever you want, but I have a Blood Scepter, just so that I can top up to 108 HP. Which is really nice. And, yeah, I mean, I never run out of food. I could probably come in bringing maybe like 3 anglerfish, because you get food drops here. And so with like 5 bastions and 10 or so sand views, this trip lasts for a pretty damn long time. Obviously the benefit to shadowing and running around is that you have like essentially infinite supplies. But really, how long do you want to stay here? I mean, I only have to re-gear once per task like this, which is really nice. And that's about the extent of it. I know I have Alter up, so maybe I'll use Alter next kill. And we'll do a couple more kills like this to show you guys a little bit more. But it's pretty straightforward. And thanks to Lightbearer, I'm going to get back to 90 or 100 spec. Some of the kills are faster, some are slower. But it's all okay. And I can do myself a favor as well. If I bind Zammy over here, if I want to be a bit particular and get more out of my bind, I can run further away like this. And so I can let Zammy start running towards me and let him close the distance, because he's not going to attack me during this point. And now I don't have to time anything. Now I can do one more attack, and I can do an attack here, and now I bind him over here, which is fantastic. And it just turns out the corners of the room work really well for this, as long as your first tick attack is like pretty much on point. So now I can stand over here, and we're chilling. Notice I am taking a decent amount of damage, but that's kind of expected. Again, on task, you'll just kind of nuke him. And this is also the purpose of the Echo Boots. They eat an angler here. Oh, hey. This is scripted for the video, if you didn't realize. I paid a JMod, and I've been rewarded. I'm just gonna refreeze this guy. And we're gonna end this guy's whole career. So there you go. Definitive proof the method is in fact RNG supported. And yeah, pretty cool stuff. So anyway, my general verdict on the clause is not really that interesting. Like, it's fine, but I do think it probably needs a small nerf. Just to bring it in line with what was described in the initial blog post, and to really make them a bit more easy to understand for players. So people aren't selling their claws in favor of this, you know? This method is sick. I really urge you guys to go try it out. I will say Emberlight's probably the best weapon. This bow is only really useful here. But there are some funky stuff at Tormented Demons as well, where it doesn't really quite make sense yet. We think the bow, the demon effect isn't working on there. We think Mark of Darkness isn't maybe working fully, so there's a couple of small bugs going around, and that's kind of normal for releases like this. So typically we want to wait until the next Wednesday to really understand what's happening. But this is more or less where I'm standing on all this stuff right now. In other news, I think Araxor is coming out before Varlamore Part 2. And I was told today that Modash mentioned that Varlamore Part 2, the group boss, that's probably not going to be in summer. Which is fine, because I think Araxor and Varlamore Part 2 are more or less going to be the two things that are coming out this year that are sort of like, well, the big two things at least left to happen this year. And so Araxor is going to be very interesting. Should be fun to see where it's placed. Probably Mauritania, same spot as RS3. And I've got a little slot in my bank for the Slayer Helm, so yeah, a little PSA if you guys haven't got... Oh, time to run. If you guys haven't got a couple of Slayer points stocked up, it's time to. Because the only way to get an Araxor KC on release is going to be to get an Araxite task. And that's going to be something you probably have to either Turiel skip for, get lucky on a Slayer task for, or burn points for. So consider getting some. I've got about 4,500 Slayer points myself. And I'm going to be looking to burn a lot of stuff on release to try and get that stuff. So, should be very fun though. Araxor probably a month and a half away. And, well, let's refreeze that guy. And WGS looks to be quite late this year. Sorry, not WGS, Valamore Part 2, with the group boss and all that. But, very much looking forward to it. So, that's about it for me. Don't get the claws too soon. Wait for Wednesday to find out what's happening, and let me know what you think. Am I right or wrong, or what's up? Because I think that the best solution right now is to make it 35% spec. That kind of solves all the problems, puts it back to where it was designed to be, and that's kind of it. And let me know what you think about this Zammy method, because personally, I would say this is clearly meta for solo players now. But is it too strong? Should it be in the game? Does it not matter? Because God Wars is old. You know, all that good stuff. But I hope you enjoy using it, guys. Very, very fun, and see you later.